reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. The crowds asked John the Baptist, "What should we do?" He said to them in reply, "Whoever has 2 cloaks should share with the person who has none. And whoever has food should do likewise." Even tax collectors came to be baptized, and they said to him, "Teacher, what should we do?" "Stop collecting more than what is prescribed." Soldiers also asked him, "And what is it that we should do?" He told them, "Do not practice extortion. Do not falsely accuse anyone, and be satisfied with your wages." Now the people were filled with expectation, and all were asking in their hearts whether John might be the Christ. John answered them all, saying, "I am baptizing you with water, but one mightier than I is coming. I am not worthy to loosen the thongs of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fan is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn. But the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire." Exhorting them in many other ways, he preached good news to the people. The Gospel of the Lord. Good afternoon, Corpus Christi. And I began our liturgy today by mentioning that today we celebrate Gaudete Sunday, and the word Gaudete comes from Latin, and it means rejoice. And why do we rejoice? Because the Lord is near. Now, those of you who were at the 10 o'clock Mass 2 weeks ago when our Bishop Kevin Van was here, he mentioned that the third candle on the Advent wreath, the color is not pink. Okay? Well, then what is it? And then some people said, well, it's rose. And he said, well, it's dusty rose. Okay? I prefer mauve, but be that as it may, whatever color it is, all right, that rose color, pink color, dusty rose candle reminds us that this is the third Sunday of Advent, and it symbolizes joy. So yesterday, just before the 5 o'clock Mass, a parishioner came up to me and said, well, aren't you going to wear rose this weekend? And in many of the churches throughout the diocese, they do have rose vestments. They're worn twice during the year, this and the fourth Sunday of Lent. But this is what my response to them is, well, I'm not taking a crowbar to my wallet and spending $500 on a rose vestment to wear twice during the year. Okay? So this is dusty rose today. Okay? All right. So, be that as it may, let's get started. And we heard from both the prophet Zephaniah and Paul today, and the theme of their message is joy. And yet, we go to the gospel, and there seems to be a disconnect between the gospel and the other two readings, but there isn't. I'll bring it together. So, Zephaniah the prophet, he says to his people, "Shout for joy, O daughter Zion," meaning Jerusalem. "Sing joyfully, O Israel." Why? Because the Lord is in your midst. And Paul says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Why? Because the Lord is near. And then our responsorial song today, we said, "Cry out with joy and gladness, for among you is the great and holy one of Israel." So we have that theme of joy. But I think really to absorb the impact of those words, we need to take a look at the context. The prophet Zephaniah, he is writing to a people in darkness. They do not see the light. They are in captivity. They are in exile. They are in Babylon. and they're longing to return home, and they are on the edge of despair. And so out of that experience, the prophet Zephaniah says to his people, your salvation is drawing near. The day of exile is coming to a close. You will be set free, and you will be allowed home. But in the meantime, stand firm in your faith. Do not despair, have hope. Do not doubt, have faith. That's the message of the prophet Zephaniah. And then Paul writes his letter of joy, to the community gathered in Philippi, a letter to the Philippians. And where is he writing his letter? He's writing his letter in prison. He's experiencing the darkness of captivity. He is held hostage. Paul is struggling. He does not see light. But he says to his people, coming out of that experience of darkness, he says to his people, rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Why? Because the Lord is near. And I always like to make a distinction between happiness and joy. I'm happy when my team wins, and I'm not happy when they lose, and they mainly lose. Okay? So I'm not a happy camper most of the year, all right? But I always like to make a distinction between happiness and joy. And we're going to see that difference in our readings today. So people of God, human life begins in darkness. The universe was created out of darkness. 9 months later, the child sees light. But that life within is evolving and developing in darkness. And 9 months later sees the light of mother's loving gaze. But in the meantime, in the womb, your salvation draws near. Your mother is near to you. The tummy is a veil that separates the unborn child with the mother. But the mother is near. But yet what's interesting is they are connected. It's the cord as the mother feeds the life that is within her. Rejoice. God is in your midst. God is near. God gives us the Eucharist. He gives us his body and blood. It's the cord. It's the heartbeat. It's the blood. We are being fed. We are being fed by our God on this side of eternity. And the light will be shown to us when we are ready to receive the light. So the message today is don't despair. The message today is have hope. Have faith. Our God draws near. And I think it's an important message because some people really struggle during the season of Advent. Some people in our assembly this afternoon, some of you are in darkness. You don't see light at the end of the tunnel. You are in the midst of darkness. Maybe it's your first Christmas without a loved one. So there's that grief, that loss. Maybe you're going through a divorce, unemployment, perhaps some type of emotional discomfort, such as depression. Oftentimes we find ourselves in darkness, and we want to hurry and get out of that darkness. And I think part of the message today is no. The light will reveal itself when we are ready, when it's time to be born. That's when we will see the light. But realize that human life, like the universe, it all began in darkness. And then in time, there was light. And in our own lives, that's how it goes, oftentimes. And we want to rush out of the darkness. But rather, when we're going through the darkness, Lord, I have faith. I have faith that you're going to see me through. I have faith that it will be made known to me, that it will be revealed to me, that I will have understanding when it's time. When it's the right season. So that's the very first thing that I would say. So there seems to be a disconnect between our readings of joy and John the Baptist. So we have to shift gears here, because what does John say? The crowd asked John the Baptist, What should we do? The tax collectors asked John the Baptist, what should we do? And the soldiers asked John the Baptist, what should we do? So what does that have to do with joy? Well, this is what John says. Whoever has 2 cloaks should share with the person who has none. And whoever has food should do likewise, share. Joy is in the giving. Joy is in the sharing. Joy is in generosity. When we share what we have been blessed with, when we share our time with someone who is lonely, when we share our empathy and compassion with somebody who is hurting, when we share our faith with someone who's given up on God and is in darkness, we will experience joy. And as I said last week, we're filling in the valleys. The question last week that I asked us all to reflect on, what are the valleys we are called to fill in? And so when we share, we're filling in the valleys. We're filling in somebody's loneliness. We're soothing somebody's heart who is suffering. And we're giving hope to someone who has given up on God. So that's the very first thing that the Baptist calls us to do. It's not hard to do. We share. And then the tax collectors were hated. Okay? They lined themselves up with the empire. So the Holy Land was occupied by Rome. But John the Baptist, he doesn't say to the tax collectors, get out, change professions. He doesn't say that at all. He doesn't say to them, leave your post. No. He says, be just, be fair, okay? Be honest. And then to the soldiers who represent the empire, to the soldiers, he says, he doesn't ask them to leave, but he says, do not practice extortion. Do not falsely accuse anyone. And then, of course, my favorite line, which I say to the pastoral staff, I go, be satisfied with your wages. All right? So what the Baptist is saying to us is the Baptist is saying, be conscious of who you are. Be conscious of your responsibilities. Exercise your duties with care and unselfishness. The Baptist is calling us to integrity around our state of life. He's not asking us to leave. He's not asking us to take on another profession. But rather, he's saying your duty is to serve God where God has placed you. Our duty is to serve God where God has placed us. That we are to bloom, where we are planted, as the Old Testament says. And then John is really saying to us, it's not where you are, but it's how you live wherever you are. So be conscious. We all wear many hats. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a priest, I'm a pastor. You wear all different hats. Husband, wife, mother, daughter, son, let's say banker, administrator, nurse, attorney, entrepreneur, laborer. All of us have different roles. We wear different hats. And the Baptist is saying, live your life with integrity. When we live our lives with integrity, when we are obedient to the commandments, and we are doing what God asks us to do, we have a clear conscience. We can sleep at night. That's joy, huh? That's joy. Having that clear conscience and living our lives with integrity. What a wonderful calling it is to be a grandmother, huh? And grandmothers love to spoil their grandchildren, right? What a wonderful calling it is to be a husband. A wonderful calling to be a daughter. Huh? All the many ways that we have been blessed. And John the Baptist is saying, just be aware and live your life with integrity. And then we have joy. Okay, I'm about ready to land it, folks. So, this week, heading into Christmas, we have 3 penance services in our deanery. All begin at 7 p.m. All begin at 7 p.m. Now, the thing about the sacrament of penance is that's where we reclaim our integrity. We get our integrity back when we humble ourselves before the Lord. Lord, may I be humble so that I don't stumble. Okay? I've been out of integrity, I've been out of alignment, and to make things right, I confess my sins. It's a humbling experience, but it's never about humiliation. It's about walking humbly with God so that we don't stumble. So tomorrow evening, and I'll be there, it's at Holy Trinity in Ladera Ranch, and there'll be a few priests there. And then Corpus Christi, 7 p.m. on Tuesday, and there'll be a number of priests here. And Wednesday at Our Lady of Fatima in San Clemente. Now, like many of you, I'm last minute. Do not be last minute. There are no confessions next Saturday. So Wednesday's really the last opportunity to celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation. So next Wednesday I'm going to be with family, okay? Because all of my brothers and sisters, they're spending Christmas with the in-laws. So we have our gathering on Saturday, so I won't be here, all right? So make sure you celebrate the sacrament of penance sometime this week if you go. And the three questions. Okay? What are the valleys we are called to fill in? Okay, so that's an examination of conscience. Which mountains within our lives must be made low? What must we die to? Our sins, huh? And then in our gospel reading today, John the Baptist says, this is the kind of Messiah who's on the way. And in the not today's gospel, but in the gospel, Jesus will say, I did not come to bring peace. I came to bring division. So what does he mean by that? We get that in our gospel reading today. Now, I'm not a farmer, so I had to do some looking up. But he says today, his winnowing fan is in his hand to clear his threshing floor. So a winnowing fan was a fork-like shovel. So the winnower used the fan to throw wheat grain into the air, and the heavy kernels would fall to the ground, and the lighter shape would be, or shaft. One of these days I'll get that word down. The lighter shaft would be blown away, gathered up and burned. Gathered up and burned. So Advent is a time to clear away the shaft in our own lives. So what are the things that separate us from receiving God with joy at Christmas? So those are the three questions. What are the valleys we are called to fill in? Which mountains within our lives must be made low? And what are the things that separate us from receiving God with joy? Just take one of those questions and use that as an examination of conscience as you ready yourself for the sacrament of reconciliation. Let us now stand and profess our faith.